Forest Service is looking at doing some limited tag permits into the wilderness, some of the wilderness areas. So we brought Matt Peterson from the U.S. Forest Service. He wanted to come talk to the hunters and
learn a little bit about how hunters use the wilderness. I'm not going to pretend I'm not a hunter. I do fish, but I'm not a hunter. So I'm not sure how folks, we wanted to gain some understanding and learn from all of you tonight. So that's my goal, is to learn from you. And so this project is called the Central Cascades Wilderness Strategies Project. And like I said, we're hoping to get a better understanding of how hunters, all of you, use the wilderness. And by wilderness, I'm talking about designated wilderness, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And I also want to give an opportunity to collect thoughts, feedback, comments from all of you. So I'm going to pass two things around. First, this is a sheet if you want to sign up for the mailing list for this project. So as we make updates available or send out documents for public review, go ahead and put your name and your email on this. If you don't do email, go ahead and write your physical address. We can snail mail you something too. But if you want to get updates on this project, just go ahead and sign this up. It's optional. You don't have to do it. So I'll send out a few this way and a few this way. And if it gets full, just bring it back up to me when you're done. I will also have these right here where you can write comments directly on here. It's another place where you can write your name and email address as well. If you want to have be contacted about this project. So I'll pass these around now. You can fill out your comments later or as you go, or write down any questions you have. But I'll pass these around. Here's this. And so I want to be clear, just to start things off, we're in a planning process. We haven't made any decisions yet. So we have some proposals that are out, that are going to be out for public review. So we've been doing a lot of thinking around this. But a lot of the fine details haven't been decided, and that's why we're coming to groups like you to learn a little bit more about how we can make permit systems work in a way that don't get in the way of hunting. And so that's what we're here today. And so what I'm going to talk about, I'll talk for probably 15-20 minutes. I want to give a brief introduction about wilderness. When I talk about wilderness, what does that mean, and what does that mean in terms of the Wilderness Act and the law that we need to follow when we manage these wilderness areas. I'll talk broadly about wilderness, and then I'll take it specifically to the Central Cascades, I guess, which is that way. And so straight east of here, between here and then. I'll talk about some of our challenges with managing those wilderness areas, and then I'll talk about our planning efforts. As I go, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. Let me know as we go. We don't need to wait till the end. So first, what is wilderness? Wilderness, when I'm talking about again, it's from the Wilderness Act. It was signed in 1964. It's a congressional designation. Congress is the only entity that can designate formal wilderness on public lands. And it is only on public lands. It doesn't apply to private. And it doesn't apply to most national forest land is not wilderness either. So on the Willamette National Forest, which is where I work, we manage about 1.7 million acres of public lands. Only about 380,000 is designated wilderness. So that other 1.4, 1.3 million acres, this project we're talking about doesn't apply to that. And so it's only the wilderness. And so I want to talk about what makes wilderness different. And so I'm going to share a few quotes from the Act. And these are the things that we look to when we manage wilderness. And it's the law. It's what we're required to manage wilderness for. And so wilderness are lands that are designated for preservation and protection in their natural condition. It's an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man. It's an area of undeveloped federal land retaining its primeval character and influence without permanent improvement or human habitation. It has outstanding opportunities for solitude or a primitive and unconfined type of recreation. It shall be devoted to the public purposes of recreation, scenic, scientific, educational, conservation, and historic use. So wilderness now, so in 1964 when they first created, there's only about 9 million acres of wilderness in a handful of areas. And so So since 1964, the last 54 years, there's now 756 areas across the United States that are been designated as wilderness, and those are in 44 states. Anyone have any guesses on what the 6 states that don't have any designated wilderness?
Rhode Island would be one.
Rhode Island, okay.
Texas.
Rhode Island's right. Texas actually does have some.
Connecticut.
I'm sorry?
Connecticut.
Connecticut, yep. Okay, we got 2.
Vermont.
No, Vermont has some.
Hawaii.
Hawaii has some.
New York.
New York has some.
Delaware.
Delaware does not. There's 3. DC. What was that? New Jersey has some, surprisingly.
California.
California has lots of wilderness.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts has some. So Maryland is another East Coast state, and then for any of you who are Midwesterners like me, Kansas, and then Iowa. So I'm actually from Iowa, so I left there a while ago. So the 6 states without wilderness are those right there. Otherwise, every other state, and even a territory or 2, has a designated wilderness. Some of them are pretty small. Some are really big. But it's about 109 million acres across the whole United States. And wilderness is managed by 4 federal land management agencies. Park Service, the Forest Service, which is who I work for, Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
They constitute about 5% of the U.S. geographical area.
Yep. So it's probably hard to see from there, especially when it's maybe a little out of focus. There's a map, and all these little splotches are different wilderness areas. The different colors represent the different agencies that manage those particular wilderness areas. So drilling a little bit to Oregon, you can see in Oregon most of the wilderness is managed by the Forest Service, which is all the green. There's a little bit that's yellow, which is managed by the BLM. But you can see that we have wilderness scattered throughout the state. So I'm curious, before I start talking about the Central Cascades wilderness, what does wilderness mean to all of you?
No roads, no motorized vehicles.
All right, no roads, no motorized vehicles. Yeah.
Less people.
Less people. Yep.
No structures.
No structures.
A place where you can hear the birds.
Yeah. Yep. You mean anything else for anyone else? Anything else for anyone?
Place for us to go as we please and leave no trace.
Yep. Yeah, it's a pretty remarkable place. It's pretty unique. There's
a place to go and maintain trails.
yeah, there are trails, and it's a place to maintain trails as well.
I think with the college too.
Oh, really? Awesome. Great. Yep. We have we do have trails in wilderness. So.
Volunteer.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the Central Cascades. And so this area that specifically I'm talking about are 5 wilderness areas. This is from north to south, so Mount Jefferson, Mount Washington, Three Sisters, Waldo Lake, and Diamond Peak wilderness areas. So those 5, 4 of them are jointly managed by the Willamette, which is again where I work, and also the Deschutes National Forest, so the east side. So the Willamette National Forest goes up to the Cascade Crest, and then once you go over the crest, then it's the Deschutes National Forest. And we work very closely with them because wilderness is supposed to be managed as a whole. We're not supposed to slice it right down the middle based on jurisdictional boundaries, but we manage the Three Sisters Wilderness as an entire wilderness. We manage the Mount Jefferson Wilderness as an entire wilderness, not just where our forest boundaries are. So we work very closely with the Deschutes in managing those wildernesses. We happen to also manage, by way of the Willamette, there's some lower elevation wilderness areas, Opal Creek, Menagerie, and Middle Santiam wildernesses. These are on the northern end of our forest. Menagerie and Middle Santiam are out of Sweet Home, up the Highway 20 corridor, and then Opal Creek is out of Detroit. So, but this project is about these 5 right here. And so here's a map. So here's Highway 58. So Diamond Peak is south of 58. Here's Highway 126, 20, and 22 that all come across at Santiam Pass. And so Mount Jefferson, Mount Washington, Three Sisters, the Waldo Lake Wilderness, and Diamond Peak. Here's Bend. None of these west side cities are on this map. So combined, those 5 wildernesses are a little over 500,000 acres. So, some of the challenges we're facing with managing these wildernesses. The big one is that we're facing most recently is use. These areas have become incredibly popular over the last 3, 5, 10 years. Some areas, 500% increase in just a matter of 3 to 5 years. That's not everywhere, that's just a few specific trailheads. But some examples are, so for the whole east side, so out of Bend, accessing the Three Sisters. So back in 2011, which isn't that long ago, we had about 35,000 visitor use days. 2016, so 5 years later, it was all the way up to 116,000. So in 5 years, it almost tripled. Jefferson Park, so the white number of visitors, so 2,000, 4,000, all the way up to 14,000. So it peaked, it went up a little bit in around 2,000, went back down, hanging around in the 4,000 range, 4,000 to 6,000, and then boom, huge increase in the last couple of years, up to over 12,000. So Tam MacArthur Rim, there's another one on the east side. This is the one that's close to 500% increase. Hang out less than 2,000 visitor users, and then it peaked in 2016, up over 14,000. So, and that's a huge, huge increase in use.
Do you have any indication as to what's resident, like Oregon resident versus, people traveling from out of state?
We don't actually have good data on that. We know it's a mix. We know, Bend is a big tourism economy, and we're getting, quite a bit of tourism on this side as well. So that's definitely part of it. But it's also just tourism isn't the only explanation for it.
And your methods of collecting that data was consistent over a period of time, or your data collection methods consistent?
Mostly. I mean, it's not perfect. These numbers, take them all with a small grain of salt, but it's not gonna. This isn't an error in data collection. So for those of you who go hiking in our wilderness and get to the trailhead, and you fill out one of those self-issue permits, because every trailhead in the wilderness has those self-issue permits. They're free. There's no limit to them. That's what we use to collect data. That's one of the main reasons why we have those self-issue permits there. They are required, by the way. So next time you do hiking, make sure you fill it out. But that's how we collect it, and then we can make adjustments too based on our ranger contacts out there in terms of compliance and that kind of thing.
Got a question.
Yeah.
It looks like it seems like historically there's been a correction when you have a peak, whether people get turned off maybe by the amount of people when they have the experience, they decide, let's go somewhere else, it's getting too crowded. And it looks like it's been self-correcting throughout. Now I see that you've seen year over year substantial increases for the last couple of years. Is there any indication that this could self-correct on its own? I mean, just based off of what it's done historically, because people go out, I don't want to go hike with 100 other people, I'll go somewhere else.
That's, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. I mean, it's possible that it's going to go down. It definitely went down last year. With all the fires we had and all the closures. I don't have 2017 data on this one, but I know it's going to be quite a bit lower for all those other reasons. Whether it's going to spike back up again this year, we're assuming it is. Bend is still as popular, getting outdoors is still as popular, but because we don't know what's going to happen, we also can't just wait and see. And so.
Let's see, you've got pretty good gaps in your data. Every year you will have a 7-year gap, and next year you have a 4-year gap.
Yeah, some of it is data collection and what records we still have, so that explains some of those gaps. Back to this question, it's without knowing exactly what's going to happen, and because this heat is so much more dramatic than anything we've ever seen. Even if it drops up by half, that's still way more than we've ever had. And so we just have to prepare that even if it levels out at this, or even if it drops up a little bit, it's still way more than we've had in the past, and probably way more in some of these areas than they can handle without the impacts I'm about to talk about. So here's just another example. Huge peak at 6 Lakes, which is also on the east side. And so the thing is, this isn't just happening to us. This is a statewide phenomenon. It's happening at Columbia River Gorge, happening at national parks across the country, happened at Smith Rock. It's happening, up in Washington, and so it's more than just Bend, it's more than just tourism there, it's more than people from here exploring and desiring the outdoors. It's happening across the country. And so there is some phenomena that's happening right now that's encouraging and enticing people to the outdoors, which in many ways is a good thing. It's good that folks are getting out and recreating, but it does come with challenges. So some of the things we're doing to deal with that, we've been trying to increase staffing, but we have not been able to keep up. We partner, we have volunteers where we can. We also have a lot of existing rules for folks going into the wilderness. There are certain areas where we have designated campsites. There's certain areas where we don't allow campfires, and those aren't always mixed, or aren't always the same. We have camping and campfire setbacks, so either you have to camp or have a campfire a certain distance away from a trail or from a lake. We currently have 2 limited entry areas, so you may have heard of the Obsidian limited entry area, which is in the Three Sisters Wilderness, and the Camellia limited entry area. So these are 2 areas where for the last 20 plus years, anyone going into that area has had to get a permit, and they are limited. And so that's for day hiking and for overnight hiking. So we've had limited entry areas for over 20 years now in two smaller areas within these larger wildernesses. But we're still struggling. Even with all this work and all these rules, we're struggling with this huge increases in use. And so this is just a small percentage of it, but our rangers packed out over 1,200 pounds of garbage a couple years ago. They buried a lot of human waste. Big trailhead, we have some of these trailheads were designed to handle 10 cars, and now they're seeing 100 cars. And so here's a little video just on the Century Lakes Drive, or Century Drive on the east side. I'll just let it run for a minute or two. All of these cars are just parked along the road. I mean, these folks have to hike half a mile on the road to even get to the trailhead in the first place. This is not the driver taking the video.
One thing that has happened with the statistics, I do statistics for a living, I'm a real estate appraiser. There's been a drastic increase in consumer confidence in the last, say, 4 years. And so gas prices are down, wages have been up a little bit. So you've got, naturally, you're going to have a larger increase in people taking a share of wilderness use and being outdoors. Just because of the economy shifted around as well. So.
Yeah, I think it's, it's a confluence of a lot of factors. I'm sure that's part of it. Social media, I think a lot of folks now see
Kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I hit the emergency because someone started yelling at me too much. Social media, so folks see an awesome photo on Instagram and want to go to that area, so that's another thing that people are talking about as a reason. I saw a McDonald's ad where they're selling their McCafes, and it's someone with a backpack hiking. So there's some cachet to being outdoors right now for a combination of reasons it's driving this. So other impacts we're seeing might be hard to see, but this whole site is covered in user-created trails that weren't there a handful of years ago. And some of these landscapes like this, these don't go away very quickly. Low elevation where there's lots of greenery, those will grow over pretty quick, but some of this stays there for a long time. There's issues with graffiti, campfires, campfire rings. Fire rings aren't allowed in wilderness, so we dismantle them when we see them. Structures aren't allowed, and so they found over 400 structures. Most of these are wind walls on South Sister, but we also find them deep in the woods and other places. And then firewood collection has its impacts, because folks don't always know to collect dead and down wood on the ground that's smaller than your wrist. And then campsites that are expanding. So, that's what we're struggling with, and that's what we're trying to get ahead of. Our mandate for wilderness is to preserve and enhance wilderness character. And so that's our legal mandate as an agency, is to protect wilderness and try to protect the wilderness experience that's out there. So here's 2 passages from the Wilderness Act that really emphasize, secure for the American people, present and future generations. And so it's really making sure that these opportunities continue to exist into the future, as well as trying to provide for the current users as well. And then this one also talks about unimpaired for future use as wilderness. And so seeing those big increases in use, seeing the impacts from that use is why we're stepping forward with a planning effort to look at different ways of managing visitor use. Question?
What you just had on the previous slide, I mean, that's almost, I mean, switch the words around, that's almost verbatim to like the mission of the OHA, you know, for protecting for the future generations of the heritage through habitat enhancements and everything else, and then preservation of our ability to do what we do. You know, so I mean, I'm agreeing with you entirely there, but you know, the nuts and bolts of what we're looking at is the impact to what we as hunters are going to be able to do as far as access to these areas.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean this. Yeah, you're what we need to do, but it doesn't mean it doesn't come without tension and conflicts in terms of conflicting mandates that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to manage these for recreation, and we're supposed to protect it for the future. And so, how do we best do those both? And that's what this effort is about. Is as we come up with visitor use management strategy for these wildernesses, how do we balance these different needs for access and the need for protection?
So wasn't the Forest Service considering building a bike trail right through the middle of the wilderness? Where does that fit into this?
No, because bikes aren't allowed in wilderness. And so we do not propose or support or anything like that with bikes in wilderness.
So you guys don't have a bike trail, not in your area, but in eastern or central Oregon?
Not in wilderness. I mean, I think it's between all four agencies. No agency allows, because mechanized transport is one of those things that's not allowed in wilderness. We can't even use a wheelbarrow. When we do the trail work, we can't even use a wheelbarrow in wilderness. We definitely do not allow bikes. That we would not be proposing bikes. There are some long distance bike routes that have been proposed, but they don't cross wilderness.
Let me ask you another question. You allow propane stoves and camp stoves.
Yep, propane stoves are allowed, camp stoves are allowed.
Recognized devices, that'd be one way to limit them.
They're not mechanized transport. It's actually mechanized transport. Neither are GPSs and neither are cameras, but we're not about to get in the realm of regulating those personal use kinds of things. So if you choose not to use them, that's all you do.
The problem is you have too many people and you don't want the wilderness anymore. You have too many people, it isn't a wilderness anymore.
Yep.
Regardless of what, and if you were a way to reduce the number of people, they could take all their devices.
That is one strategy. We have not thought about prohibiting device. You should write that down. That might get us in more trouble than other things.
Right, yeah, right.
So we're working with the Deschutes on this project. Again, we're looking at all 5 of these. And we started our planning effort about quite a year ago, but we're still in the middle of it. And so some of the things we're considering, so it may or may not include, but probably will include, some version of a limited entry permit system, which is I'm sure why most of you are here and want to talk about this. So our proposals do all include different variations of some limited entry permit system. And they look at both day use and overnight use. We're proposing a recreation fee, or will be proposing a recreation fee. We don't know the specifics of what that's going to look like at this point, but when you need to get a permit, our hope is to be able to charge a fee with that as well. Designated camping is on the table, is something we'll be looking at. Managing parking a little bit differently in some areas. We're looking at more campfire bans that's based on an elevation level. And then coming up with action thresholds so that we can implement or make changes based on our monitoring of whatever happens out there. And what's tricky is sort of what we talked about, what I talked about earlier, is balancing the need between these different conflicting mandates that we have around wilderness management. We're supposed to protect the solitude and opportunities for unconfined recreation. We're supposed to preserve for the future. So how do we best balance these different competing demands? Question?
I spent many years as a backpacker and quite a bit of time in the Sierra Nevada mountains where all these things had been implemented going back into the 70s.
Yep.
Usually, you would have to plan your trip. They would want to know everywhere you're going, where you're going to stay each night, and it would take up to 6 months to get your entry. So you'd have to start planning these events in winter to pull a summertime or when the snow starts giving access into the high country.
Yep.
As a hunter, it would be an issue because we don't even know where we're going to be pulling permits until usually in June. And by then, if it's a limited entry type situation, we could run into a conflict on time because the permit time isn't even available to us in that.
Right.
So not only would there be an issue with possible people who would be upset with people with bows or rifles or whatever wandering around if you have a mixed constituency up in there,
Right.
but that time element when we don't even know when we're going to be able to get in there, and when you're hunting, you can't say exactly where you're going to be at all times
Right.
because you're following the game.
Right.
So something would have to be worked out to allow us some leeway in that kind of a deal. But I do understand, I'm used to that system.
Right.
Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I used to avoid the John Muir Trail because it was a zoo,
Right. Right.
and I hate to see that happen.
Yep. Yeah. And that gets it exactly why we're here. And because like I said, our proposals do all include some type of permit system, but that devil is in the details about what that's going to look like. And so some of the conversations we've had generally about the permit system is that some are reservable, but we would save some, a certain percentage. I don't know what that is, but 30, 40%, something like that. For that only become available the day of or the day before. So there's always the opportunity for spontaneity or making adjustments to your plans. When the permits will become available, right now the Obsidian Camellia ones don't come available until May 1st, but that might change as well. Our permit season currently, where those permits are required, is from the Friday of Labor Day until the end of October. We're talking about shrinking that down a little bit to maybe to the end of September instead, but we haven't made decisions about that as well. And so this is the chance, this is why we're here tonight, is for you to share with us when we think about these different rules around the permits, what would work best for you. And then what I want to get to as well is how a hunting license or tags, how those might be able to work in lieu of a permit instead of a permit. And so we'll get to that in a second. And so the gentleman in green in the back had a question.
I was just gonna say, so is there a way we could just limit to people like that, not only limit to more people out of state that aren't from our state? Because there's, I don't know, I hunt high Cascades a lot. I actually run into more people from out of the country than I do from local.
Right.
So if we're gonna limit to people, it should be limited to people that aren't from our state, that aren't paying our fees, because I buy my sportsman every year. I pay for parking every time I go up there, because you pay every day you're there.
Right.
And let's say we pay for 15 days because we think we're going to be there for 15 days. We got our deer the first day. If we don't get a reimbursement on the next 14 days, then we pay. It just goes right into it.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
don't
so
think
we're part of the federal government, so we manage these lands on behalf of all folks in the United States.
All U.S. citizens.
Well, and the visitors to the United States as well. And so we can't legally give preference to folks who live in Oregon. We can't give preference to citizens. It's
You
just
can't give preference to citizens over non-citizens.
no. We manage on behalf of all the public. And so as a federal entity, that's not an option for us is to even look at treating Oregonians differently than Californians.
Not even hunters, the people that pay the extra money to be up there.
Well, so that's where we're going to talk about hunters and hunting fees or hunting licenses and how we might be able to look at those a little bit differently. So that is a different scenario or a different situation.
Now, how would that work with all the hikers on the Pacific Crest Trail?
That's another good question. That's another area we're struggling with in how to manage the PCT, Pacific Crest Trail users. 'Cause some of those folks, they're starting their trip in 3 weeks. They're going to start hiking in 3 weeks and they'll come through Oregon in August. But they can't predict exactly what date. And so we're in conversations with the Pacific Crest Trail Association as well as how do we make this permit system work for PCT hikers.
Because I know that's the number of people doing that now is way bigger than it ever has been.
Yep, it's increased a lot as well. So.
When you guys were compiling the use statistics with the Trailhead Registry, is there a certain time of year that you notice a drastic increase of trailhead use?
Yeah, actually, in a minute, I'll have a graph that shows over the course of 2016 over at some particular trailheads and for the wilderness as a whole. So Yeah, let me shoot through a couple more slides and we'll really open up the conversation. So like I said, we're in the middle of the planning process, and so for those of you who are not familiar with how we do planning as a federal agency, we look at a bunch of different alternatives. And so in our environmental assessment, which is the document and what it's called, we're analyzing 5 different alternatives, 5 different ways that we might manage visitors. So we always have a no action alternative, which means the status quo, so no changes to what we're doing. So we're looking at that. And then we have 4 different alternatives that we're looking at. They sort of range from the most regulation, alternative 5. This is looking at everywhere in those 5 wildernesses, you would need a day use permit, or for day users, if you're camping overnight, you would need an overnight permit. To alternative 3, which is probably has the least regulation of all these, which is only focused on some of the high use areas. So there's very limited, only a few trailheads would have day use restrictions. The overnight limits would still be in the Mount Jefferson and Three Sisters Wilderness areas, but it would leave out Diamond Peak and Waldo Lake, and I'm actually blanking on Mount Washington right now if that's part of it too. And so we were looking at these different alternatives. This document, we're still working on it, and again, that's why we're here, is we're still working on some of the fine details of what the proposal is going to look like. And when we release this in next month, middle of April, it's a draft. And so we put it out for public comment. That's why if you put your name on this sheet that went around, we'll send you an email that you'll be able to see a copy of that document and give us your comments and feedback and ideas and thoughts. And so then we take 3, 5, 6 months, depending on how many comments we get, and make adjustments to that document and adjustments to our proposals based on what we hear from the public. And so when I say no decisions have been made, we have not made decisions. We've got these ideas we're looking at, but they're all adjustable.
You do have a preferred alternative, though, do you not?
We will. The 4 supervisors have not chosen what it is yet. I honestly don't know what the preferred alternative is going to be. But there will be a preferred alternative that will be identified in that NDA. So, yeah. So, I mean, when I say nothing's been decided, we're not going to propose the no action alternative. We don't take a project like this to just say we're going to do the status quo. So we are going to choose some kind of permit system. So that is part of what our proposal is. The details of that proposal, there's lots of opportunity to make adjustments and to think differently, especially as it relates to hunting access. So I really want to emphasize that.
If you apply this program and then you have a fee schedule, are the fees, the monies you receive for that specific area that people are going to have a permit for, going to stay in this district, or are they just going to go nationwide?
No, so the way the fees work, whenever you pay a recreation fee on Forest Service lands, 95% of it stays with that national forest. So when you go up to the Willamette National Forest, you buy a Northwest Forest Pass at one of our offices, or say you put the $5 at the Trailhead parking area, 95% of that stays on the Willamette, and we use that to manage those facilities and those sites right there. So any fee associated with these permits, 95% of it's going to stay with us to help us manage the wilderness, help us do trail work, help us clean up the trash, help do all that kind of work. And so it does stay locally. 5% goes to our regional office in Portland. So even that stays at least in the Pacific Northwest.
Is there a balance between, because it seems like some of the areas that are higher for recreational, tourist type thing are the bigger volume, and the hunting areas, my experience is mostly with Diamond Peak Wilderness, which I've covered a lot of it. I don't see a lot of tourists out there hiking around.
Right.
So it does seem like there's an opportunity to focus on the areas that are of higher impact that would be a less, at least seasonal impact on hunting.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's where this alternative gets at that. It leaves out Diamond Peak. But I'll be honest, one of our concerns is we don't know where the next Tam MacArthur Rim is. That went from 2,000 users for the last 20 years and then jumped to 14,000. That might happen. No one predicted that. And so one of the things we also are thinking about, so now alternative 4, it responds to this issue, but it's a little bit broader because we know that people are going to be displaced. When we put a limit in at Tam MacArthur Rim or at Green Lakes or at Whitewater that goes to Jefferson Park, when we put limits in those places and they hit the limits, those people are going to go somewhere else. And so how do we not suddenly, some of your guys' favorite places to go hunt where you're away from people, how do we keep from inadvertently sending them to those areas? Because we put limits in only the high use areas. And Bannon Peak, West Side, probably not. You have to drive a long way to get there. And that's where this is trying to get at a little bit of that potential displacement issue. And it's really hard to predict where, how visitors are going to change their behaviors once we have some limits in place.
As somebody that uses the wilderness a lot, I would prefer to, rather than anticipate and possibly restrict some possible additional influx in traffic in an area, why not just wait and respond accordingly to where we see the demand, rather than limit opportunity for people just on the assumption that that would be the most likely next place to go. It just seems to me like, why would we prefer that alternative as not just the hunting community, but the public in general, as why not just address the issues when they become an issue, as opposed to, I mean, it seems to me that you could implement a fee use on a trailhead very quickly when it becomes obvious that this area is being impacted heavy. Say you have 2 years in a row, like you saw in some of your slides there, where you saw, quadruple increase in just a couple of years. Now that gets implemented, you flip the switch, that trailhead now becomes a fee use trailhead. And maybe the trailhead that was historically a very high use, after a couple of years, maybe people are tired. We don't know. Would those fees, would you ever see that be removed if we saw a trail that became less desirable?
Let me answer. I would love to yes, but there's a lot of questions there. We are designing this so that we can adapt in the future based on use. And so the part of our proposal is going to have an adaptive management plan that will allow us to, based on monitoring, based on looking at permits and where people are going, that if an area is not included in the quota system, it's not in a limited entry system, but we see that, the intent is to design this in a way where we could flip that switch. And so it does give us that flexibility to turn on quotas in other areas if we see a need to. And so that is, so through all of these, this one already has them everywhere, so that doesn't have that. But these other 3 alternatives they all have that option to be able to flip a switch if we see really big, significant, noticeable changes in how visitors are using. And that could theoretically mean taking a quota away. If some area gets totally burned and suddenly no one is going there anymore, then maybe we don't need to quota there anymore. That we can also turn off. That's probably less likely, but that would be an option as well. The challenge with that is, how many years from now are we going to be able to make those changes based on our analysis now? This analysis usually has there's no defined, it's good for 5 years or good for 7 years. There's no exact time limit, but it does, just people move, people forget, and things change. And so the ability to make changes 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road becomes a lot more challenging. And so how do we also not set ourselves up so we don't have to do this again in 10 years or 5 years? So what we think about too is, how do we not have different rules at every single trailhead? There's a matter of implementation and making it easy for the public to understand what's required where. And so that's the other part that we think about with implementation, is ease of understanding for the public. All of you, because you have a really thick book of all your hunting rules, you're probably a little more skookum on how to figure that stuff out than the general public, but a lot of the public struggles as is with their different rules in different places. And so that's another part of things that we keep in mind too, is we don't want every other trailhead to have different rules if we can help it, because that also becomes very confusing for the public. And people who want to do the right thing have troubles doing the right thing when they can't figure that out.
What are the current penalties for
if we see people littering, we don't ticket them. We just tell them and educate them about what they need to be doing. And so, occasionally we'll ticket folks if what they're doing is egregious. And I'll be honest, I don't remember I don't write tickets. I don't know what the consequences are. But we also tend to write warnings before we write tickets. But if someone goes into the Obsidian limited entry area, they don't have one of the limited entry permits, we do write tickets for that sometimes. So this shows how use So this is for the entire Three Sisters Wilderness. This is just overnight use. This is over the course of 2016, so starting in May, all the way until the end of September. So you can guess what the weekends are. Friday night, Saturday night. And so you can see the peaks. So, you know, not surprisingly, July and August are the busy times. Maybe there was a cold spell right here in the middle. I can't remember exactly why that would have gone down then, but our proposed quota for the Three Sisters, you know, and the quotas will be assigned by Trailhead, but if you added all that up and we added up all the use, there were some days during the course of the year within a proposed quota where, and if everyone distributed themselves across the landscape, where the Three Sisters would have been full based on our quota. So there would be some displacement a few weekends throughout the summer.
What percentage of that is the south? Do you have a breakdown by Trailhead to know what percentage of that is specifically?
Green Lakes Trailhead, right here. There's a lot more displacement at Green Lakes. You know, it's almost every day for a few weeks at a time during the course of the summer where our quota. So this would be a day use quota, and this is the overnight quota. So this is day use numbers, and this is overnight. And just for clarification, the numbers, if you're looking at that closely, for overnight these are groups. For day use, these are individuals. And so we're looking at them a little bit differently. So you can see how our quotas might affect some of these really popular places a little bit differently. So here's French Peak. You know, so here's West Side, where our day use quota would affect a few days, but not too many. And then overnight, it would affect a few overnight users as well, but mostly are about a handful of times.
You're saying you're only going to allow one group at a time?
You can allow one.
But the French, that's the tentative proposal right now for French Peak. It would be one group.
I've been in the French Peak.
What do you deem as a group?
So when you go into the wilderness, you fill out one permit, and that's for your group to say there's 4 people. I mean, our limit is 12. But if you're traveling as a party, as a group together, that's what a group is.
You're not going to allow, you're going to allow one group overnight, French Peak,
One group going in the French Peak Trailhead each day. That's the proposal. And so some of this is to preserve the low-use areas to allow them continue to be the opportunities for solitude and not allow them to explode in use.
So I have a question. Okay.
Yes.
Just based off of that, if I'm seeing you could add 2 people, 2 groups to that particular trailhead and accommodate 90% of the users, why would we limit it to 1 and you know what I'm saying? It's like, would one more overnight group
Right.
that could make that much impact and that many people that wanted to go camp there? To me, why would that be set at 1 group when you could set 2?
Who's going to set the quotas, I guess?
Yeah, it just.
It is a art as much as it is a science. And so, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to look for feedback on things like this, because again, they're not written in stone. There's no decision, so we can make adjustments. And so what we did, I think, do I have a slide? I don't have a slide. But the way we did, we looked at historical use, we looked at travel patterns, we looked at the condition of the area and where people go, the number of campsites that already are in an area. And we used all of that to come up with proposals for these quotas. And so there's no exact algorithm that says X plus Y plus 2Z equals the quota. It's a sort of professional judgment looking at those numbers. Question?
What have you got budgeted for this project?
I do not know that off the top of my head. So that's that's a good question. I'm
And
not sure.
who's going to make the final decision on this?
Yeah, so the decision maker for this are the forest supervisors for the Willamette and the Deschutes National Forests. So they're the decision makers. And so leading to decision, that's a good segue to, so where we're at right now, we're doing the planning. Our draft environmental assessment, like I talked about, comes out next month. And so there'll be an opportunity for public comment at that. Again, sign up to receive notice of when that comes out. You can send us comments. we'll take a look at all those, we'll make changes, and then the aim right now is to release the final environmental assessment with a decision sometime this fall, probably around November. And then, if everything works, the hope is to implement spring of 2019. And there'd be a lot of, if that's the case, there'd be a lot of education about the new system and what that would look like.
When you start implementing the system, I would think that you need to have a group of concerned people, the public, our group, other groups, have a commission or committee or something that would have input on those quotas when you set those up, instead of some isolated bureaucrat making a decision. And that's the thing you see with any kind of federal regulations, is regulation's good until you get some bureaucrat that has his own agenda and starts pushing his agenda, and that causes problems.
Right. Yeah, no, I think, I think we're really open to comments about those publics. I mean, I think, that those quotas will be part of this right here, and this is a chance for folks to share with us concerns or things that we're missing or things that we should be thinking differently about. And so again, these are all proposals for the public and for folks to reach out to us about, to educate us and give us ideas about what we think we should be doing. So I think I saw a hand here, and then.
I have 3 questions.
Yes.
First off, you're putting in time frames, right? So you have basically Memorial Day to Labor Day, what it kind of looks like through September. Is that the permit time period? And then after that time period, is it closed, or is it open to general access?
Open to general access.
So the month of October, like hunting season, would be open to general access. You wouldn't have to have a permit to get in there for October.
Not a limited permit. We might still require our self-issue permits, the ones that are free that we currently require. But yeah, there would be no limits.
This would be for summertime access at that point, right? And if it's a bow hunter, you've kind of hit on this topic a couple of times. But as a bow hunter, you guys are entertaining the idea that if a person has a valid hunting license and a valid tag during that time period, that they get in for free in addition to these tags, or in addition to these permits? Or is it going to be like cutting out some of the permits in order to allow that to happen?
So we're working with ODF&W, so a few of them are here, to get numbers, because whether we need to carve out and adjust the numbers based on the use, if there's tons of bow hunters running willy-nilly up there, then yeah, we might have to reduce fees during that time. Or I think the hope is the use is moderate enough that that it can absorb that little bit of use during that time. And so that's part of, again, what we're trying to figure out and try to understand. What does it mean for bow hunters that go up there? And I think related to that is, so if you have a hunting license and a tag that allows you to go bow hunting, does that only apply to you, or does it apply to your whole hunting party? Up to 12 people, can't be more than 12, because that's just the rule of the wilderness. And so those are again, it's easiest for us to say we want to allow hunting licenses to work. But the devil, again, is in the details of how do we allow that, and not just let anybody go buy a $33 general hunting license, and that's their annual pass to go hiking in Green Lakes all year. I think it's the general, just the general license. I thought I looked, it was $33 for just the general license, no tag or anything. Yeah, just the basic hunting license is $33. So that's what the challenge is with us saying, okay, you have a hunting license, you can go in the wilderness. Is that suddenly...
Right. And your biggest influence, your biggest impact would be high cascade rifles, probably, where you're going to have a lot of people, there's a lot of tags issued. How many tags are issued, Chris?
3,300.
So 3,300 tags for high cascade rifles. And that's usually at the end of September.
From September 8th to 16th this year.
Is that what it is? So,
yes.
So that's going to be in that time period, right? So you're going to have 3,300, potentially 3,300 hunters in that area during that rifle season.
Right. Is that the data you just gave us?
Yeah, you don't even get that many.
Yeah.
You get maybe 1,500.
So that's potential, right?
Yeah. And so
if we look at, I don't have my glasses on.
Yeah. So this is where we're working with
Thank you.
This is where we're working with partners to help inform how we would do that. I mean, because our intent is if you have the high cascade rifle tag, it's right in our permit season, you've got permission to go up there, that would work. You would not have to get a limited entry permit to be able to go do that. That's the intent, that's our thinking right now. But we want to understand, if we were to do that, what does that mean for all of you? How does that, what kind of use does that mean for, the caveats, like, does it apply to the whole group? Do you get to bring 3 people with you? Do you get to go in a day before the season opens, or do you need 3 days before the season opens? That kind of thing is what we want to learn from you here. And so,
Are any of these permits gonna go to additional enforcement for that area for that? Because, I mean, if you're supposed to have permits and we wait forever for a permit, we finally get one for that Cascade season type of thing, you know, we're in that list. And here and there, we're walking around and you're running into people without permits, we're gonna have additional Leos up there to help enforce that?
why don't we be scaring away the big game though, if we're up there too though?
No.
No, I don't.
Law enforcement never scares away big game.
Okay. You know, I can't speak to how we would do enforcement, you know, in part because we don't know what our resources are gonna look like. You know, I don't think we would do any more around hunting season than, you know, because really the big issues are gonna be around, you know, the areas like Green Lakes or Whitewater Trailhead, you know, where we get a ton of users coming in. You know, that's the area we'll probably be more focusing in enforcement. That said, we'll be tracking everywhere, but, or as much as we can, but, yeah, so it's hard for me to answer that for sure.
So a couple of things, along with High Cascade Hunter, rifle hunters, you got, September's also archery season.
Yep.
So a lot of wilderness hunters begin their scouting as soon as the snow melts. We're up there July, August. So when you say tag, are you talking about only specifically a deer tag, or would you be talking about a bear tag, which starts August 1st, or would you be talking about a cougar tag, which runs almost year round? What would classify as a tag? I know you said you'd like input. What's the best way for us to be unified in the voice that we're saying that, you know, ultimately, every hunter that I know that hunts the wilderness is not going to be looking to go up a trailhead like the one you showed that's got 400 cars parked. No hunter I know is ever going to even go in that trailhead. Or, you know, South Sister, you know, those aren't the places that hunters are going. We're going, if we even have to use a trailhead, which preferably I don't even go in on a trailhead, but if we do, it's only a limited distance, and then we're off the trail for the entire time of the hunt. So with that knowledge, you know, and based off our conversation before, it sounded like you had a pretty good idea of that. I want to make sure that it's really clear that that's not just one hunter. It's not just the hunters in this room. That's going to be the same story you're going to hear every single hunter you talk to that hunts the wilderness, whether it's a Cascade rifle hunter or an archery hunter, or you're talking to them on the Willamette or on the Deschutes. So how can we get that message across, you know, really clear and get it across so that that's what we don't want to be impacted?
I mean, and that's, I mean, sharing here, you know, with us here in the room, you as a group, you know, having conversations elsewhere, and, you know, you can submit a letter on behalf of OHA or this chapter even and say, you know, please allow bear tags and High Cascade and, you know, deer and elk tags or whatever they are, that, you know, to allow, but, you know, cougar tags, that's not going to affect us. So go ahead and, you know, or whatever it might be, you know, talk to us about scouting. You know, I think this scouting gets to be a tricky thing. You know, when we're talking peak season, because you have a tag, do you get to go in there whenever you want?
But again, it's not, I mean, if the idea is truly to alleviate the pressure on a few isolated, specific target areas, again, we're not going to be scouting in those places. You will never even know that we were there, and neither will most of the hikers that are hiking there.
Right.
You know.
So you're right, and so I think the challenge, or what we want to understand is how you use it so that we can allow that kind of use, you know, mostly unimpeded, you know, as unimpeded as we can, but also not create ways to game the system who aren't hunters. And so that's the kind of thing that we need to understand is how do we design a system that really that doesn't impact many actual hunters, but doesn't create lots of openings for folks who just want to try to get through and get up there. And so the gentleman in blue has had his hand up, and there's been others, and then Chris, you had yours up. I'll try to.
I just noticed that the whole thing was about the increase in use. It wasn't that it was actually misuse, just an increase. But you never brought up horses. And they just tear it up. They crap invasive species the whole time they're out there. It's just like, and to not have that addressed and say that people that are staying on the trail, I mean, like, just because they're on the trail, that's just so. They're horses. horses, and they're not even from America. I mean, what are you talking about? That's just so backwards.
You know, I mean, honestly, the biggest impacts we're seeing are from people and not from horses. I mean, horses have, I mean, everybody has impacts when they're out there. Horses definitely have a different kind of impact than people. But the scale of the numbers of people we're seeing is why that is the big issue that we're wrestling with. And so that's why we're looking most closely at high use areas and managing people differently. And that, you know, that will affect horse, you know, equestrians as well, because they're gonna have to get permits too. But the issues we're seeing are driven by people, is why. So, I think as Chris
Talking about the different user groups, and I've been in discussions here with the Forest Service over that, and it's a tricky thing to do because, you know, if we tie it to a tag, whether it's an archery tag, or a bear tag, or cougar tag, or upland game bird stamp, then we leave out potentially hunters who are going up there to hunt small game, and there's no tag required. So it's difficult to know, you know, how many hunters are in each one of these user groups. We have our harvest statistics from our mandatory reporting for the high cascade hunt, but for all these other hunts, it goes by wildlife management unit, and we don't know what percentage of those hunters are using the wilderness and what aren't.
Because
And
predator
so-
hunters as well.
Yeah.
Predator hunters, right? Yeah.
And so this is something, you know, if you guys are gonna put a letter together, you had good response to your Facebook post.
Right.
You know, maybe you could get some numbers on how many hunters are actually using the wilderness. Because we don't know, we're guessing, just like the Forest Service.
because we have to draw a line somewhere. You know, under this proposal, we're proposing to draw a line somewhere, and we're trying to figure out where to draw that line and what shape that line is.
When you bring it right down to it, there's really almost no change in impact from hunter participation, because we have to get tags. We have to, you know, you don't get your tag every year for whatever area that you happen to be hunting. So that is already got a red line stop on it, and we can't wait to get off the trail. So if we're getting on the trail in the first place, it's only because, all right, this is a little bit easier way to get around this ridge, and then I'm dropping off of there. So it's the rest of the traffic, which is totally legitimate. I mean, you know, there are people that don't hunt that love the wilderness like we do. They absolutely have every right to go there. But that seems to me that is the much more significant percentage of increase of what's going on, what's impacting the use of these areas than hunting. Hunting has already got a governor on it, you know. It can't really go anymore because we're already limited to some extent, not excluding, you know, predator or your upland game or anything. I don't know. I don't really go to high altitude to go upland game bird. I mean, you can, but you gotta find other areas that are a lot more productive. So we already have limitations.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need more.
Yeah, the hunter numbers have not been increasing, they've been declining.
Right.
We'll go back there and then over here.
So I'm not trying to be petty, but several years back, ODFW made a major change, and a lot of people still to this day haven't noticed it. They don't sell hunting licenses anymore. They're recreational permits. So when you talk about recreation, the mountain, it says recreational license on it instead of the old hunting license. So, just for common topic, I mean, you know, because we are talking about recreation, different types of recreation. I see people looking.
You know, yeah.
All right. We'll go over here first.
You mentioned earlier about the possibility of just some Joe Schmo from, you know, Maine or some town. With this permit system going into effect, what's to prevent them from just going and buying a hunting license and say, use it all summer long?
$200.
Yeah, but the hunting license is $33.50 or whatever, okay? Then you require a hunting tag, cougar, bear, elk, deer, whatever, okay? We also have these annual parking permits too, that get issued as well with the hunting license. reason that you couldn't actually have a little piece of paper that issues with a hunting license for granting access for wilderness trailhead permits during that time frame. In addition to that, I don't really see a drawback of more dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars going into ODFW's budget when they're already hurting already. I don't see a problem with that at all.
Right. No, and our concern is with that is that it would, if it's a system that can be easily gamed, we're going to continue to see the impacts on the resource. And so that's what we're trying to mitigate, is to not make it easy for someone to work around the system to get in. And we'll still see 14,000 people at Tam MacArthur Rim and human waste everywhere and garbage and all that. And so that's what we're trying to find the balance of. I mean, if it drives a few extra folks to buy a hunting license, and even if they buy a hunting license and a tag, and it goes to ODF, more money for ODF and W, that's great. I mean, they're great partners. We work closely with them. But it's how do we meet the intent of what we're trying to do here too, is what we're trying to balance.
It appears to me that your alternative 3, which concentrates primarily on the high use areas, if you went with that alternative, the hunting pressure kind of resolves itself because people that want to hunt a lot of the people, so they're not going to go to high use areas anyway. It seems kind of
Yeah,
it's self-taught. Tony mentioned not using a trailhead to access wilderness areas. You don't use a trailhead, you don't have a self-issued permit. Then technically you're in violation of the wilderness area.
Technically, yes.
Well, I understand.
Yeah. But we probably won't find you back here. But yeah, technically anyone in the wilderness is supposed to have a self-issued permit when they're back there.
So I suppose you stop by a trailhead, fill out the thing, and take it with you.
Yeah, or next time you're hiking, grab a few with you and fill them out when you start hiking. Stop by our office. There's a question right here.
I just had not a question, but more of a comment. I think most of the static you're going to get from a group like us is that we're already facing a loss of huntable grounds through private property, other forms of land management, private companies that own vast tracts of land that are excluding us now. Our only real opportunities left are on public land, and now we're going to see that opportunity shrinking as well.
Right.
We already have game driven off of public land onto private land. Very little opportunity is left because of that problem. This just adds another mix in there, decreasing our opportunities. And, let's face it, giving hostility from our type to your type, even though my wife is career Forest Service, and I really admire you for standing up there.
Notice I'm close to the door.
I think that's what you're going to be facing.
Yeah. No, and I understand. We met with Chris and Joe earlier, and just and they talked about Weyerhaeuser and some of the changes that have happened and the challenges that you're facing, and that the timing of this is tough. And so that to me, like it strengthened the need to come here to understand how can we design the system so maybe it shrinks down or tightens along the edges, but how do we not have as much, how do we minimize that impact to all of you, knowing that most of you have probably, are pretty light on the land. You are in areas where people aren't. That's where you're going to find the animals.
I think we
that's
all
the
value
experience
that
you want.
wilderness experience.
Exactly. And so how do we still facilitate that and allow that and still meet the need that we need to do something different in the wilderness too? And so how can we make these tags, these licenses, some combination of that will work for you and for us and together, so that those quality hunts still exist, and they don't get overrun by people.
Thank you for reaching out to us and not just dictating.
Yeah.
That would not be received well at all.
And how would that work with like out-of-staters? Because like I have a friend that hunts the Cascades and comes here from like Kentucky, and he shows up here this fall. Gets picked up at the airport by a friend, and then he gets to a trailhead, and then doesn't have a permit
For hiking or for hunting?
for hunting.
Well, if we work out a way that his hunting license works, that's all he would need.
Yeah.
The permits would be available on recreation.gov, they're available online, so you wouldn't have to come to our office to get one if they were here to hike. But yeah, again, hopefully we can find a way to make the hunting licenses and tags or some combination of that work, so that once he has that, he's good to go. That's the hope, that's what we're thinking right now. So, I'm gonna go here, well, actually, your hand first, and then rest on hand, and then we'll do it. Yeah, so yeah, our proposals, the alternative 5, and I'm pointing over here even though it's not there, there's a limit on the number of day users and a limit on the number of permit users per day.
So now, our season starts the last week of August.
Yep.
That's been met. How do hunters fit in? If it's the cap has already been met for that day, he comes along, wants to go, he can't.
Well, that's where, but that gets at, if your hunting license counts, you don't have to get one of those permits.
Is he gonna be part of the cap? Or is it kind of separate?
It would be separate. I mean, that's that's what we're trying to figure out, is there a way to keep it separate? So, I said I hand over here, then there and there.
I've got just 2 things I want to bring up, and the first one, just because it came into my head, what kind of fees are these permits and day use and overnight things going to have on?
I wish I had an answer for you, but I don't, because we're still...
But they're all going to be feed and not just the free day use passes anymore?
Correct. Yeah, if there's a limit permit, if you're required to get a limited permit, there would be a fee that would come with that. Right now, right now we do the Obsidian and Camellia limited entry areas. We actually don't charge a fee, but the reservation service does, and that's $10, and so that just goes to the reservation service. And so a fee like that will continue to exist, and then we would have our recreation fee on top of that. And so how it works, whether it's per person, per night, per group, those haven't been determined yet.
My other thing was just as everybody's been talking about using your license and tag or whatnot as valid entry passes. I think this might be a good one even for the letters. Like how you're saying it'd be easy for someone to just go spend the $30 and get a hunting license for all year. If you require a valid recreation license with a valid tag and then like prior year purchase of a hunting license or whatnot, because then you're going to skip over those people who want the shortcut by having to invest the year before and then having to invest that year and a tag. In all reality, like they were saying as well, you're coming into the hunting realm isn't going to accomplish you guys anything with the traffic areas, because that's not where any of us are.
Right.
But it's imposing restrictions on us and possibly fees on us for no reason at that point.
Right.
Our fees are already down a lot.
So it's over here next, and then...
So when you're saying implement in something like the map purpose in places where I go sometimes, and if there is like an implement, and I do get my sportsman, I know I have my tag, is there a way like maybe you guys could put a thing where we could reserve time 6 months in advance? Like we know we're gonna hunt this time for 13 days, we reserve that 13 days, and then out of that 1,000 people that are allowed at that time, or let's say whatever amount of people, we are already in there. Like we're already there because we already...
Like a side channel for hunters to get in?
As long as you got your tag and like you're gonna do it, because I know we have time limits, you know what I mean? Whether it be 4 days to 13 days, like we know you're gonna be there that amount of time. I mean, it would be nice to reserve it knowing we're gonna get there, not get our tags, get our permits, and then find out, oh, we can't even go up there.
Right.
That would...
Yeah, I'm not, I don't know the functionality, we'll have to work within the recreation.gov functionality with that system works, and whether that's even possible, I don't know. And that's an idea worth capturing for us exploring.
All right.
So, right here, and then here.
Totally agree with him on that, because I drove half a state and saw a big red sign that said, you can't come up in here without a permit. So
it's hard.
Totally agree with that. But my thought is are you looking at just daily caps or annual caps?
In terms of use?
In terms of use, because you were showing like all that slide with all the different trails that users had made. you know, and are you looking at annual caps or,
It's
or,
daily.
or daily?
It's daily.
You know,
Yeah, so it'll shave off the peaks, you know, so it's not like it squeezes all the use here, it'll be, you know, the red line across the graph, that is that limit each day was that high,
okay.
so.
Yeah, because I mean, like, all the people, you know, a lot of the use that you're seeing on that spike, you know, it's people that are driving down from Portland and, you know, Multnomah County, basically, coming over, they're going to their little property that they picked up for really cheap and outside of Sisters or Ben. You know, they're going out there, and most of them, they can wait until the next day.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a real big issue on them, but like people like us that are driving from over here, we're making that 3-hour trip. And then we show up and then we see like, well, shit, now we can't go anywhere unless we drive another half state. So
Along that line, how would you know before you showed up at the how would you know what the quota is? Is there going to be like a real-time display on the?
Well, you'll have to get it before you get to the trailhead. You'll either have to reserve it online. Like, so this is not, again, if your hunting license is good, you're good. If you're going hiking and you want to get a permit, you'd have to either go online before you leave or get on your phone and get it before you get to the trailhead or stop by our office. Because they're not going to be available at the trailhead. These are all going to be, you know, issued at the offices or online.
So how certain is it that the hunting license or tag is going to be a for sure access permit here? I mean, it sounds like you're talking like that's a very real scenario, but how do we know, or how do we make sure? I mean, we can put together an OHA letter from the state representing, you know, 10,000 hunters. We can do that. We can have individuals here email tonight and send in their comments to, I'm sure you have a link for, or an email for that to make sure that those get. But how do we make sure that in the meantime, when this actually goes into final print, that all of a sudden they didn't change and say that, well, actually we changed it and we're still going to have to limit the amount of hunters?
Yeah, so, you know, we'll take these comments now. You're welcome to send comments now. But when we put this draft out next month, that's where we'll have made at least preliminary decisions about, or at least, you know, for what we want to propose. And so it's when this draft EA comes out, environmental assessment comes out, that you'll be able to see what we're thinking and how. Again, that is our thinking right now, is that a license and tag or some combination of that is something you can use. But again, the devils are in the details. So you'll be able to see here what we're proposing.
Okay.
And so, you know, I would recommend waiting to write your letter until we come out with this, and so you know exactly what we're responding to. I'll take this conversation, and that will inform what we propose. So it's definitely worth you still writing stuff down now. But the formal comment discussion is going to be later. So,
just to add to that, Matt, in this process, if you get in your comments during this early stage and you follow that through to the end where it says that the decision is made, people who participated in that public comment process can say, wait a minute, you said you were going to do this and now you did this, and you can file an appeal. And then this EA would go to the region, and then region would decide whether they uphold the Willamette National Forest decision, or whether they remand it back to the district and say, yeah, you guys ignored these comments, you redo the document. And even if the regional office upheld it, then you have, 45 days to file a lawsuit.
I don't remember the days.
So there's ways to deal with it if you get into the comment process and make sure your voice is heard.
All right, thank you for your wait.
Yeah, thank you. So, I guess what I would like to say is, maybe there would be a provision about who else is covered besides the licensed hunter, or the hunter with the tag, because, some people are going to bring a friend, with them to help them. Some of them are going to bring a son or a daughter, because they're trying to teach them about hunting and stuff like that. And that's just something that should probably be taken into consideration. Is there supplementary people that are able to come in, to get entry
hunting in the wilderness, how big are your groups? I'm just curious, just.
1 to 4 typically.
4, 1 to 4,
I'd say 1 to 4.
2.
Probably 3 others.
Anyone more than 6? Like, including your base camp, you know, so this is including your base camp if you have one.
Well, every year is different.
Yeah.
But in every situation is different. But if I went out there and my son-in-law had a tag, my daughter, she doesn't like to hunt, but she loves to go, my grandkids, hopefully we're gonna bring them up there rather than the streets downtown Eugene. And so how about that when you have them?
Right. Well,
I have a tag, my son-in-law has a tag, but the rest of them don't.
Right. And, well, that's why I'm asking, is to get a sense of, you know, if we allow, you know, maybe if your license and tag count and it can count for the whole group,
Or plus
is
one.
the average group going to be 3 to 4, or is the average group going to be the full max of 12? And so that would be, you know, we would think about that differently. It sounds like most groups are smaller, but some are going to be a little bit bigger perhaps. But if you had 2 tags, you could bring more folks. So.
I think it'd be nice if it at least covered anyone 12 and younger. So I mean, if you are bringing a kid or like me, my little brother, who's not old enough to have a hunting license but still likes to go, 12 and under would cover them, and at 12 they can buy a hunting license to hunt.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a great idea too.
You could implement a +1 possibly too. If you're actually going to go up to the high cascade ones on your license, you get like each license gets a +1. I mean, it's +1, but I don't know how many people are going to take 3 kids with them to go shoot anything at one time. I don't know, that might be hectic for me. 1 I can handle, 3 I can't handle.
Is the draft gonna have some photos in it of the specific one that Tony was bringing up about moving the cap from 1 to 2 to show the degradation in the areas for the rationale of why you're talking about that cap? At the moment, it was a great presentation you've been doing, but there's nothing in there showing, here's what you saw that area looked like in 2010, and here's what it looks like now. And this is why we're talking about limiting the number of heartbeats in that area.
Yeah, the EA will talk about that a little more specifically where we have data. You know, we don't always have great data to be able to pinpoint those kind of comparisons. You know, we have data about like how much trash we collected and stuff like that, but that's as variable based on our staffing than as much as it is use, because our staffing has changed over time too, because we did look at that. Could we look at pounds of trash collected? And it's, well, some seasons we had 3 rangers and some years we had 6. So obviously we collected more trash when we had 6 rangers, and it was not connected to the numbers of users. But the EA is will try to get at that. I mean, there's no picture, there's no data that says 1 user is right, 2 users wrong. You know, that's where it's not a precise science, and we try to do our best with all these different data points and professional judgments. And that's where you all can inform some of that judgment with some of your comments. But the EA will say what all the quotas are that we're proposing, and some of the issues in those areas why we might be proposing those.
I'd also say just use caution when making some of these final decisions. When you look at it in an amalgam, there's a peak that comes in a you know, a fraction of time that really wasn't shown in all the years of data before that. The economy's gotten better, people are traveling, not doing things. That's a very short-lived thing, and I'd hate to see major impacts happen on, you know, a lot of people that enjoy the wilderness the most, just because of, you know, a drop of sand in time through the hourglass, you know.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about scouting, but the question I had is that how important is overnight camping to scouting?
Could you answer the question?
That's
how important is overnight camping to scouting?
For example, if we just thought, well, if we allow day use for scouting but not under your hunting license, I mean, I'm assuming that wouldn't work, but I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that. So my particular, you know, if you're going in early archery scouting for particular like mule deer bucks, of course they're active, you know, early in the morning and late at night. So I found the most effective way is to backpack in, get as high in, as far in as I can get, And I actually sleep right there on the ridge near Timberline, so I can be there at very last light. I'm not gonna hike 3-4 miles back out after dark and then turn around and do the same thing. In July, when it's getting daylight at 5:30 in the morning, you know, you gotta sleep there. It's a short night, and you gotta be right there at daylight again. So it's critical for me. I mean, it would be very difficult to be effective scouting if you could stay the night up there.
How soon before the season would you go out and do that, Tony?
Well, as soon as the snow melts, so it depends on the year, but definitely by early August. But I like July. It's a great time. The bucks are out there for a lot longer period during the day, and they're easy to see.
I know people are out there putting their game cams up now. Plus, you know, sometimes it's like 7 miles up there. It's like not everybody wants to hike 7 miles, then scout all day, then hike 7 miles out of dark. It's a lot of hiking. This last year alone, I stayed, not last year, but year before we did 97 miles in our 11 days up there.
And we weren't even, I drank a gallon of whiskey.
What?
I drank a gallon of whiskey that week.
You know, it was 97 miles we put on up there, so it's like, if we like, that was 12 days worth, but in just one day, I know I put on 24 miles on one day alone, and I don't know if I wasn't really pushing myself to get out of there, that might have taken me to. So it's like one day is really pushing it if you actually want to get out there and do what you want to do. Because you're not, you go out there one morning and not see anything, come out the next morning and there's like 12 deer. Like it's so hit and miss out there on scout. It's just, because they got migrate, I mean, it's just.
Well, and then like, you know, like I work construction, so it's like, I might get a call that I don't have to work one day, and so like, I'll jet to the mountains, and then it's like, you know, that permit would be hard. So, you know, it's like, and I worked all day, ran up into the wilderness, you know, hiked in 3-4 miles to get a camera, and then drive back, you know, and then, you know, be home at 11 o'clock at night, and then be back to work the next day. I mean, granted, like, we all do that, or not in our sanity anyways. But, I mean, it happens.
I will just say on a side that it is technically illegal to leave cameras in the wilderness. Just FYI, just so you know.
It was on the edge.
So, I mean, and it's not just cameras, it's, you know, people can't geocache up there, people can't stash food up there, there's just no stashing. So it's not picking on hunters kind of thing, it's just a flat rule of wilderness. Technically, you don't allow that, so just, I just have to say that, you know, I'm in the uniform.
So what do you do if you find one out there?
Honor thing. We might collect it. So. I didn't hear that. I have better. Yeah, that's it. Was there another question over here? Did someone else use? How many of you go scouting? How many times do you guys scout before the season? Couple times. I mean, have fun. Just try to get a gauge. Is it once, twice?
2, 3, 4 different weekends.
5 or 6 at least.
Round and a half.
As much as they
As
want
long as
to
you-
let us.
I definitely go once a month. And I care less if the snow's moving or not.
I mean, it starts with shed hunting, which is we're rolling up on it right now. So, you know, because there's things that help you with that, and you never want to stop going in. You just do that every chance you get. That's who we are. That's what we do.
That's why we pay the money. Well, that's what I'm asking, just to get a sense of what that is.
All right. So on one of these whaler starts way up in the mountains, you guys are finding garbage like 3-4 miles up there, lots of it, or is it on the lower like ones that people can access in like a mile kind of thing? You know what I mean?
It's wherever there's lots of people. You know, so like, you know, Jefferson Park is quite a ways in there, but there's, because we find trash there, we find human waste there.
I'm not saying, I just hunt it sometimes, I just hunt Marion, I hunt a lot of them, and I actually don't run as much garbage up there as I do just go into like Burn Ridge.
Right, yeah. I mean, the far,
no, I know, but I mean, it's just local, they're just like trying to like, you know, people are just, I don't know, I don't see a lot of, like me, I don't want to take 30 pounds of garbage 9 miles up there. That just seems like a lot of weight you just don't bring with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's generally, I mean, like, well, you know, places like Marion Lake, we'll find people will hike in rubber rafts and stuff like that, and then just leave them there.
Oh wow.
You know, so there's issues like that. You know, and oftentimes the trash can just be little bits of trash, but it's still trash.
No, I got you. I was just curious.
But yeah, I mean, the farther you get in, there tends to be less, even if it's a popular area, because yeah, people have gone farther, sometimes they may know a little bit more about like leave no trace kinds of ethics or not.
And they're also the kind of people that'll pack it out if they see it.
That's what I try to do.
Yeah.
Depends, I don't pick up poop.
You're on fire and I'm permanent.
So, do you have any more business?
I
I
think,
can sit around for questions.
yeah, no, I think we probably need to start wrapping it up here because we're running a little bit long.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good comments. I think one thing to take away, both between the amount of attention it got on the Facebook page and the amount of attention we get here, especially with hunters, the wilderness areas are something that we're really passionate about. As it was mentioned earlier, we're losing a lot of our good habitat and access to the area that was good habitat. So the wilderness areas are a big deal for us. I mean, that is definitely a very passionate thing. So I guess what we can do is make sure that everybody is continue to watch the Facebook page, get the emails from OHA. I'm going to keep everybody up to date as soon as that the EA comes out. I'll be posting it again so that we can get as many comments as possible. I just want to know again, like, is there anything else other than that we can do to take action to make sure that we are not going to be left out of this access?
I mean, I think that's. I think just the public comment period and making sure that, as a group, writing a letter to individuals as well. I think that's really going to be the best way.
Okay.
I mean, maybe there's other ways I'm just not thinking of right now. But I think that that's the formal way is to get the standing that Chris was talking about, and that's when we're going to be looking at all the comments we have and making the adjustments.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, I think we
just
probably
stay engaged.
need to bring it to a close then for tonight, and then I'm sure we'll all be revisiting this again.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you for coming.